Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Inking Out Loud podcast. Today, for our 21st episode, we're going to be wrapping up our discussion of Arkady Martine's A Memory Called Empire, the brand new sci-fi series Tix Kalan from Tor Books. I'm your host, Rob Santos. I'm joined again by my co-host, Drew McCaffrey. Drew, what's up, dude?
How's it going?
And I just kind of want to dive right into it because I'm a lot more stoked than I was last week at this time. This book, it really picked up in pace, didn't it, for this whole second half?
It did.
Yeah. I forget where exactly we left off. It was at the end of chapter 10, I want to say.
Yeah, chapter 10.
Did we do the interlude? Did we cover
the
interlude?
We did not
yet?
do the interlude.
Okay, so that's a perfect jumping off point right there. So the interlude we got from I'm Not About's point of view, it gave us a whole lot to digest as we start kind of running through this whole second half. Because not only do we get to see supposedly how Mahit's imago was damaged to begin with, but we get some pretty interesting motive for that kind of move in the first place. I hadn't considered I'm Not About's worry or jealousy, whatever you want to call it, that Tix Kalan is seducing too much of LaSalle Station. It was another neat sort of cultural ramification of this technology that I hadn't immediately considered, but totally makes sense when it's explained.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, dude?
Yeah, I've loved this book. Man, this is one of the best written things I've read in a long time.
It was
and for something new, it's always nice when I can stumble over a real gem like this that I've never read before. I mean, it's brand new, just came out 2 months ago. And I thought it was kind of appropriate. This is our 21st episode. Our podcast can legally drink now. And
yeah, I keep forgetting that.
And we have a very adult, a very involved, grown-up kind of book to talk about for our 21st episode.
Yeah, this was definitely a bit of a more engaging, challenging read. Although for the second half, like I said, that the pace really picked up.
Well, yeah.
I went through that second half. I think, okay, so to give some context, that first half, since we had a whole lot of, just scheduling issues, we kept putting off episodes, we were eating through our buffer of pre-recorded episodes for a few solid weeks there. And this was the book that we were on, so that I technically had the most time to get through listening at work. Mm-hmm. Because again, like I said, I've been doing the audiobook for this one, and honestly, I still found myself, I think we were given 3 or 4 weeks to read the first half of this book, something like that.
It was actually, we had 3 weeks to read the second half of Cain's Law.
Was it Cain's Law?
And then we only had 1 week for the first half of A Memory
Called
Empire.
But we had already decided what the next book was going to be.
Yeah.
So, I had started it from the time I originally started listening to the first part of this book, and I got to the halfway point. For me, I think was 3 weeks. It took me a while.
Oh,
I was just, and I did have a bit to complain about last episode. I felt some parts were boring, but that was, a personal taste thing, and I did admit at the time, I still say, it could have just been beyond me. The second half of this book, I went through in one single day at work.
Yeah.
One day. It was 8 hours of listening. I had an 11-hour day of welding. It was done in that day. It was no issue. The pacing picked up so much, and there was so much more happening that, I got everything that I wanted in the first half of this book, I got in the second half of this book. It was definitely a hell of a ride.
Yeah, and I think it's really cool how,
my beer here.
For me, I enjoyed the first half of the book quite a lot, too.
Yeah, you had said that, yeah.
But one of the things that stood out to me in the first half, it was the scene that hooked me, where I was all right, I'm in. And it was when Mahit sees Yaskander's dead body and the imago assimilation breaks down, and that was just such a psychologically tense scene. And then in the second half of this book, we got another one right off the bat with the surgery and the new assimilation of both Yaskanders, and these descriptions of she could feel her cervical vertebrae open to the air as the anesthetic wasn't working anymore or wasn't working fully, and this body horror kind of emotion pouring through her while she's undergoing this identity crisis, and like Yiskander is remembering dying and remembering not being able to breathe and trying to like take over her autonomic nervous system, and
Oh God,
and like oh, that chapter was so intense, but it was so good. It was once again, it reaffirmed my enjoyment and my investment into this story and this character specifically.
Absolutely. And I think so. If we're talking about the same chapter here, I think it was chapter 16.
Yes,
that was that explosive leap forward. In fact, I remember texting you over Facebook, Drew, when I got to that scene. Like it was on that first day, and I think it was immediately after. Yeah, it was immediately after we recorded the last episode. I was like, Drew, just fucking wait. It really picks up. Chapter 16 was incredible. And my thoughts about that chapter in particular, I have written down here. Like I had said, explosive leap forward. When Mahit woke up, for all intents and purposes, as Yiskander, that was surreal. That was terrifying. And then after that, immediately following, we get this flashback from Yiskander, from when he was chosen to be the Lascelles ambassador. He asks, "Why now?" And he's told, "Because we may have to ask Tix-Kalan to preserve us from something worse than Tix-Kalan."
Yeah.
And the entire conversation that followed was just chilling. There's definitely something larger going on. There's this sort of evil threat waiting in the proverbial wings, and I think that just hit home so hard. That's why I love that chapter so much. We got so much to digest in such a short amount of time there. It was great.
Yeah, like she did a good job of kind of ramping up the
no doubt,
the tension in this book.
No
but not
doubt.
only that, like she had laid the groundwork so well with these little bits and pieces, traced along through the first half of the book that came to a very satisfying conclusion. But not only the conclusion, but the moments of revelation during the last or the middle third of the book, essentially, where you start putting the puzzle pieces together and being like, oh wow, okay. And one of the things that I loved the most was this alien presence, this threat on the border. That very first
I think it was an
transmission,
epigraph, right?
It was an epigraph.
I almost said
don't know,
epitaph.
maybe like chapter 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And that transmission of the description, from the Lascelles pilot, and like it was so creepy. I loved that, and then I felt vindicated in the way that alien threat built into a key point at the climactic moment, and and so I'm really looking forward to the sequel of this, because obviously those aliens are going to be a bigger deal moving forward. Like we must be getting some kind of interplanetary warfare between the Tix-Kalanli Empire and these nameless aliens. So
and perhaps some some future uses for this kind of imago technology and some other methods to which it could be put to use, in the war against the aliens or whatever faceless threat that we're facing at the moment. I do like the fact that we do have this instilled in us. I mean, the book had its own climax, it had its own story, but there are still these seeds laid out for Martine going forward that I really appreciated. But is there anything else style wise you want to discuss about her before we move into characters?
Yes.
I do have a lot to say about the audiobook narrator as well. Amy Landon, she was awesome. For this audiobook in particular. She's got this kind of natural, organic feeling delivery that I feel like makes 3 Seagrass and 6 Direction, the Emperor in particular, really shine. For anybody who has the chance to listen to this on audiobook, chapter 19 was a case study in vocal performance. It was the scene where Mahit and 3 Seagrass and 5 Agate.
Yeah, when they're leaving.
Yeah, they're trying to talk their way past 20 of the Sunlit.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Mahit and 3 Seagrass, they're continuing to riff off of each other. I love, by the way, how Martine makes those two continue to get better and better at guessing what the other one's up to and just playing along. And I felt it was made perfect by Landon's sort of tremulous delivery in that scene. Like, she genuinely made those characters sound like they were on the knife edge of hysteria.
Yeah.
Like, everything about the audiobook was fucking perfect. It was awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, I may have to check that
good
out.
things to say about her.
And that ties, into what I wanted to talk about style-wise, and that is going back to the poetry. The way poetry and narrative is such an inextricably linked element to the Tixkolanli culture, and how everything needs to make sense in a literary way for these people. And I thought it was really funny how there was one point where I think it's when Six Helicopter, the douchebag.
Yeah, the douchebag.
He comes in to take 3 seagrasses and 12 azaleas cloud hooks. And he says, like, do you realize what you've done? Like, this posting political commentary on the nets could be construed as treason. And 3 Seagrass says, she's like, oh, I composed a poem about my pertinent feelings in the current, political climate. And if that's treason, then I suggest you take that up with 2,000 years of Tixkolanli canon. Because there's going to be a lot more traitors there. But like, the word choice there, canon. It wasn't history, it was canon. Because everything in this empire is built around narrative.
Yeah.
And
Interesting. I didn't
there are
pick up on that.
little things strewn throughout this book where she just has specific word choices like that help not only further the storyline, but enrich the world that she's built and help establish this culture and help the reader understand the culture. And it's done so naturally, like it doesn't feel awkward or stick out like a sore thumb or anything. It just flows really smoothly. And then bringing, of course, the poetry into it. And this is why I would be interested to at least listen to some of the audiobook to see how they read the poems.
Yeah, I had considered for just very briefly, I threw it out the window right away, considered saving that exact point in the audiobook that I had just previously talked about, Amy Landon's delivery in chapter 19, and just playing like the 12 seconds of that I found, the one that I kept rewinding again and again because it was awesome. But then I remember the part when they say, no part of this audiobook may be, produced, and I was like, oh, okay, that, maybe it's not worth it, but you definitely should check it out. Anybody who's got an Audible membership, use one of your credits for that. I mean, she Amy Landon adds this whole other dimension to the audiobook when she gets to read out this political verse. I mean, she a poetic verse. It's awesome, that line that we get repeated again. The city rises marching, 1,000 star points strong. Released, we shall speak visions. Uneclipsed, I am a spear in the hands of the sun.
Released, I am a spear in the hands of the sun.
I'm quoting something else. Here. She specifically said uneclipsed in a different part.
What?
Yeah, uneclipsed. That was the part I just wrote down. I just listened to it and wrote it down as she was saying it. It has a few different manners in which it's
I don't
said.
remember that.
Like,
was this when Six Directions said it?
No, when Six Directions said it, he said released.
Because that's the original line from the poem they wrote was released.
When Six Directions said it, he said released, I am a spear in the hands of the sun, and I have it written down here. But the quote that I just wrote down as I had it, it was earlier. I think it was in I think it was the epigraph to chapter 19. Oh, I can't play it right now though. But it has that excerpt in it. Maybe it was 20.
Huh.
It's in the book somewhere. I have it on the e-reader. By the way, I forgot to mention this at the top of the episode. I bought it on e-reader because it was just, the pace was picking up so much. I was like, yes, I want to get it again.
Yeah.
I want to see if I can read it, the physical. So now that I have it on the e-reader, I can absolutely look it up. I could do that search in Word, and I can tell you where she says, at one point they say, uneclipsed, I am a spear in the hands of the sun.
Yeah, you don't have to do it right now, like after the episode.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah.
Because I don't remember that at all.
Maybe like in the, the description on the YouTube video or something like that, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But like that, I mean, that line, that released, I'm a spear in the hands of the sun.
Yeah, when said by...
was...
in context,
I mean,
it's
powerful.
so fucking powerful, absolutely.
Yeah, that was an absolute highlight of the book for me. Was this growing realization? You're like, wait a second, he's going to commit suicide.
Yeah.
And then you're like, and then you start recontextualizing suicide in the Tixkolanli Empire, and it was really done well, because it was just before that like a couple chapters earlier, maybe not even the previous chapter, they the three of them, 19 Ads and 3 Seagrass and Mahit, took the blood oath. And this reminds you, it's like, well, this is, the linguistics, the etymological roots of these names in the Tixkolanli Empire is like, this is Central American, like Native American, Aztec kind of,
I thought it was like Zayantine.
Cultural roots, and those cultures, like the Aztecs and the Mayans, are notorious for blood sacrifices.
Oh yeah, they definitely are.
And so when
I don't know why I'm finding that so funny. Go ahead, sorry.
You start realizing in that pivotal moment when Sixth Direction is broadcast to the entire empire with the Imperial override, and you're like, wait a second, and you're seeing the characters themselves realizing and having these reactions to what's going on, and you as a reader, because you don't know as much as those characters do, you're like a half a step behind. And as you're putting it together, it's like, wait a second, he's going to commit suicide.
Yeah.
Wait a second, this has this like Aztec symbolism going on. This is not only a suicide, but a ritual sacrifice.
Yeah.
A ritual self-sacrifice.
Yeah, and it's shout out to Sixth Direction, by the way. I mean, what a way to go. I mean, he didn't have a single fuck to give, did he?
Yeah.
I mean, he just opened his femoral arteries, and then he slashed open the insides and then the outside of his arms, and then he just bleeds out in a sacrificial ceremony atop, what was it, like a temple?
The Sun Temple on the North Palace Tower.
International, or really interplanetary, like, live feed.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't get much more fucking metal than that. Like, wow, man. That was such a hard-hitting, like... And again, as you mentioned, it hit so much harder because you got the clues as it was about to happen. Like when you get what he's talking about, the context that he says, I think it was like renewal or regrowth was like the context of his conversation.
Yeah, renewal.
There.
Mm-hmm.
Renewal, and you were like, hold on, wait a second, and then of course you get the description of 19 Ads. You can see her face as she's starting to realize what's going on. She's standing right beside him,
and then has to like school herself back into stillness because she can't ruin his moment for him.
It definitely was poignant. It was It was a cool scene to read, for sure.
And then the delivery of that line, that closing line from the poem, was just...
such a good... Released, I am a spear in the hands of the sun. It's such a cool, fucking chilling line. I love it. God damn. But it just, again, about Martine's, like, her actual power as a wordsmith, the prose that she uses, I definitely had a much greater appreciation for it the second time around, like, without a doubt. And I said, so her narrative voice is really cool. She doesn't have necessarily the same, like, impact as the other authors. Her words aren't necessarily blunt. They don't seem to, like, strike. But what she lacks for in that kind of, like, I don't know, force, if you want to call it, she just makes up for with aesthetic delivery. Like the attention of her prose in particular, it seems, I found like it kind of, I don't know, it seems to like flutter around here and there, and then she finds a spot and then she dances around it before she just hurries on. It's oddly compelling. I don't know how else to describe it. It's like and I wrote down, it's like a vine that has flowers sprouting out of it here and there. And maybe it was this good from the beginning, and I just hadn't caught on until now. Like I said in the first, half of the previous episode, maybe I just didn't appreciate it at that point. But when I started realizing it and I started looking for it, I mean, I definitely found it way more palatable, way more enjoyable throughout the entire second half.
Yeah. So like her prose definitely is airy and artistic.
Yeah.
It's
flowery.
And I hate to call it flowery because flowery in the context
it kind of has like a connotation
can have like a bad
in this way. I mean,
but this is not
a
bad.
Compliment in this case specifically.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's like this is a point of wow,
in
I
her
just
favor.
totally blanked. Yeah, it's a point in her favor. But so what she does with it is, because it's this kind of ethereal flowing prose, she has these moments where she'll anchor it
Yeah.
with an important, forceful, to use your term there, like a a heavy hitting moment or line. And I think in a lot of ways she does that with the poems. She uses the poems themselves
Yes.
as like a touchstone, and it's also really interesting to look back at when she chooses to actually write out the poems and when she just has the narrative say like, oh, they were exchanging poems, or we read this encrypted poem. Like it's like she doesn't have the the initial poem in those encryptions. She has just them translate it into the pertinent information, because in those situations the poems aren't really like that would be overindulgent flowery writing, but in certain situations the poems have narrative weight, and she uses them in those situations to anchor this like beautiful bouquet of words around it.
A bouquet of words. I like
even
that.
even though the poem itself is obviously poetic and artistic and like that, because she built poetry into the world and made it this cultural
Capstone? What's the word I'm looking for?
cultural foundation.
Sure.
It's or cornerstone is a better word.
I think that's the word I was trying to say.
It serves a point in the text of, instead of being indulgent, where some people might say like, oh, Tolkien is indulgent with the songs that the elves sing in Lord of the Rings, or
I might be actually
Rothfuss is
tempted to agree with
indulgent
that.
with the songs that Kvothe performs in the Kingkiller Chronicle. It doesn't come across like that because it has narrative impact. And it's really cool to me how she uses these moments of narrative impact to solidify her prose. Like, it's this inverted, fun thing that she does, and it's a mark of, I think, a very, very talented writer. Not many authors I've read could pull this off.
It's kind of like writing meta in a way. Not too meta, but it's like it's there's more to be had when you step back and look at it as a bigger whole, rather than just being in the moment, which I think I fall prey to a lot of the time, or it's just it's a fault that I have. A lot of the times I'm too much in the moment, and I don't stop to appreciate everything that's going on around this scene and the manner in which it's delivered. So I mean, props to Arkady Martine, or Anna Linden Weller, as she is, as her
Also
real name
known.
is.
Yeah.
She did a good job, definitely. And I wasn't like, after the first book, or the first half, I should say, I wasn't entirely certain if I wanted to continue with the rest of the books of these series when it does come out. But I absolutely do now, like without a doubt. Like it was great. It was awesome. Should we start discussing some individual characters and how we thought they went?
Sure.
Yeah. So we would have to start with Mahit, right? Of course, our main character.
Yeah, I mean, she was, I thought, a little less compelling in the first half.
Agreed.
But with the integration of the new Imago and both Yskanders, and now she has this ongoing, I wouldn't call it an identity crisis, but an identity conversation. She became a much more compelling character to me. I thought she
identity negotiation, perhaps.
Yeah, negotiation. Yeah, it's even better. And it's really cool how Martine did that, where we had this expectation of what an Imago does built up in the first like 2 chapters, and then Yskander's torn from her, and she goes around telling people about how it works, right? And so we have an expectation built up for how it will work. And then when she gets the new one and has like the full Yskander integrated into herself, it is much different from what we were given to expect, where he's like subconsciously trying to take over her body.
Yeah, he's challenging it a little bit.
Yeah,
he wasn't expecting to wake up again in someone else's body. He didn't really have much say in the matter, so it kind of, I don't know, it's a little tough.
Yeah, it was fun because it made Mahit's I should say it's fun as like a reader's experience. It wasn't fun for Mahit.
It's because you saw my little head flick there. Like, wait a
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Because it really raised the stakes where it gave her a more immediate, heavier internal conflict to deal with just as all of these external events are coming to a head. As multiple coups are going down and there are riots in the streets and all that. And she's there not even fully in control of her own body.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. She felt like she was definitely a more solid personality in the latter half of this book, and I don't know if it was because it was because the pacing picked up so much, and it forced her to start making a lot more like decisions and acting on impulse, more frantically. But as a character, she felt like she had more room. Like she started to breathe more, and I don't know. I didn't realize until now, or at least until the second half of the book, I should say, how much she kind of felt suffocated to me as a character in the first half, because she's just constantly drowning in politics and assassination attempts. Sorry, that beer's coming right back out of me. She felt funnier in the second half too. Like, she started to display these shining moments of this kind of bitter, self-aware sort of humor. I want to draw to the attention right now. There's one moment after she overpowers the assassin 11 Conifer, and then 3 Seagrass starts trying to console her, and she's like, Mahit, most people don't, and then Mahit cuts her off with, what, get ambushed by strangers with terrifying weapons in their own apartments while evading their only political ally in order to have secret meetings on a foreign planet? No, yeah. I assume that doesn't happen to Tixkalan lead Slim. It was great. And again, I've said it before and I'll say it again, Amy Landon nailed that fucking line. That was probably the greatest line that she had in this entire audiobook. And I must have rewound it and listened to it like 3 or 4 times. It was fucking perfect. She had this little crack at the end of it that was just, it humanized Mahit so much.
Yeah, and there was another line like that at the end of the book between 3 Seagrass and Mahit, where 3 Seagrass says, being stuck in an underground bunker during an attempted coup and riots isn't something that was on my itinerary for what I should expect as the liaison to the cultural ambassador. And
yeah. I love those moments. I mean, they stop and realize how fucked up their situation is.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I will say, speaking of fucked up, and obviously we will be censoring this episode. But it's I actually really enjoyed the way Martine used profanity in this book. It was very sparing, but because of that, it really pops. It shows you just what kind of stress the characters are under when they drop an F-bomb.
3 Seagrass had so many shining moments of that, and we'll get to there very, very soon once we're done our discussion with Mahit. But how did you feel? How did you feel about where she ended up as a character at the very end? How specifically about her final scene is, I guess, what I want to discuss. She's heading back to LaSalle Station. It was quiet. It was personal. It kind of felt narratively like a chance to exhale, but as the station comes into view, she thinks of it as a certain kind of free, but at the same time, not in the end quite home.
Yeah. My initial reaction was disappointment that she wanted to leave Tixkalan. I wanted her to stay, but I was at least happy that 19 ads told her, yeah, I'll let you go, but I'm going to need an ambassador from LaSalle Station, and when I need her, I will call for you.
Yeah.
But because of that, I was more okay with it, and I'm also looking forward to what I presume in the second book is going to be much more focused on the counselors and the intrigues going on with them, with Amnardbot and Onchu and Tarjats.
Yeah.
Their whole three-way undercutting each other and undercutting Mahit and helping Mahit at the same time and all that. So I think that's something to look forward to.
There's some fertile
seeing
soil
more of LaSalle Station in the next book.
Narrative seeds, yes.
But I did I did really appreciate that final line, as you said, that it's not quite like home.
Yeah.
Because that tells me that this is still the Mahit we got to know over the course of the book. That she wasn't irrevocably changed by the events at the end, and it's not like she's afraid of Tixkalan, that she wants to just get out. It's like she needs to kind of recalibrate. She needs to find her center again, and I think she'll find that on LaSalle Station and then return to Tixkalan eventually, because that's where she belongs.
You see, you say that you appreciated that because it signified to you that we still ended up with the same Mahit that we started with. But for
No,
me...
not that we started with. Not
No?
that we started with, but
Sorry.
the same Mahit that grew over the course of the book.
Okay. Because I was going to say, that kind of signifies a little to me how she changed a little bit, because she definitely didn't feel quite home throughout the first half of this book. Okay, but now I see what you were saying. Okay.
Yeah, because at the start of the book, she feels like such a fish out of water.
Oh, yeah, and she
thinks of
mentions it
LaSalle as home.
so many
and
times
there's
throughout the book,
one
yeah.
important signifying moment, in fact, early on, where she considers the view of the constellations from on the ceiling above the bed, and she talks about how it annoys her that it's the view from Tixkalan, not from LaSalle Station. But then at the end of the book, when she's back in bed, finally back in her ambassadorial apartments, and she's just lying in bed recovering and looking up at it, and she's comforted by that view of the stars from Tixkalan, not from LaSalle Station. So like she definitely changed, and that's important for a character. If there was no, if she were a static character, this wouldn't have been a good book. Like the writing may still have been very nice, but it wouldn't have been a good story. Like, the characters need to change in some way. They need to make those choices. They need to be dynamic. So it was, but what I was saying about why it comforted me is because it pointed out to me that I still know Mahit.
Yes. Yeah,
She wasn't so horribly scarred by the events of that one day with the coup and all that she's an unrecognizable person now.
Good point.
So.
Good point. Yeah, okay. Thanks for clarifying. You want to discuss 3 Seagrass? You want to move on? Do you have anything else about Mahit that you want to get out of the way?
I think I've gone through everything about Mahit
Sweet.
that I wanted to say.
Sweet. So yeah, 3 Seagrass. I was so glad that she only continued to shine throughout the second half. She's still, I was gonna say naive, but no, I want to say innocent. But she's also sassy. The fact that the Emperor's Sixth Direction quoted her and then ended his own life must have hit so hard. I mean, think about where she started. Over a period. This entire book only took a place, I think, over 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Because we got that little bit at the end there about how her Mahit's mail is now 3 months and 2 weeks overdue. But over. Sorry, God, that beer is very fizzy. Over a period of only 2 weeks, she went from like this rather kind of unimportant, just, I guess, Tixkalan Leetslim. She's still a citizen, but think about where she ends up. I mean, she has the Emperor quoting her on top of the fucking the temple when he sacrifices his own life and bleeds out on fucking live feed. I was like, if you had taken Mahit now and explained it to her 2 weeks ago, could you imagine the fucking reaction you would get?
Oh yeah.
I mean, she had so many great moments in this book, and as you had just mentioned, these little. Martine doesn't use curse words very often in her narrative, but when she does, they're really poignant. They hit, they strike, they mean something. I laughed so fucking hard so many times in this book at 3 Seagrass just dropping the F-bomb. There was that moment when she stumbles across Mahit grappling for her life with the assassin wielding a poison-tipped needle, and she just walks in the doorway and goes, "The fuck?"
Yeah.
I laughed so fucking hard when I got to that point. It was so perfect. It sums up with 2 words everything. It sums up so much about what she's currently feeling at the moment. It was great. I love C3. C3 grass?
Yeah.
Seagrass.
I loved her too. She's she's probably my favorite character in the book. And I'm glad that my prediction from last week didn't come true.
I have that
I'm
written
glad
down
that
in
she
my
didn't
notes.
betray
I'm
Mahit.
so glad that Drew was wrong about 3 Seagrass. Thank God. Yeah, because you had me worried, dude. You made a good case.
I mean, I was worried myself. I liked her too much, and you know, I've learned from reading a lot of books over the years that sometimes an author, you know, tries really, really hard to get you to like somebody and pulls the rug out from underneath you. They're, you know, some characters from books we've even covered on the podcast, like Warbreaker, for instance.
Yeah.
You know, they're and anyway, I'm glad that she did not betray Mahit. I'm glad that she wasn't involved. You know, and honestly, I thought for sure when they went to the information ministry and Mahit saying like, "We got to go talk to the Emperor now," and three Seagrass says, "Wait here, I'll be gone 5 minutes," and then she comes back with the guy with 6 helicopter, putting them under arrest, and I was like, "Oh no, what did you do?"
Yeah.
And then, but then, thankfully, very quickly, it became clear that she was innocent in that, and this was not her doing. But I thought in that moment when the guy walked in wearing the purple flower lapel,
Yeah.
I was like, "No, what have you done?" Like, but
Yeah.
yeah. She's. I mean, she was just a delight to read. She's a delightful person.
What was her pedigree again? What was there's a Swazwakat Texkalan lead slim. I'm just thinking about she was a secretary. Oh, it's secretary. Yeah, that's the horse. A secretim.
A secretim.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. A secretariat. That's the fucking horse. Yeah. You know, I was so stoked, and I have this moment written down here. Near, you know, of course, near the end, I have all caps. I wrote, "Yeah, go 3 Seagrass." I was so stoked when she finally, the moment came, and she finally just went for it, and she planted one right on Mahit. You know.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
I did wish at the moment that it had happened in better circumstances, though. I mean, because it kind of makes me worry that it doesn't bode well for the relationship going forward, because it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't know. It wasn't like a moment of triumph. It was kind of like a moment of fragility and desperation.
Yeah, and there was a pretty non-committal departure with them at the end of the book, where neither really knew what to do or how to handle what happened. And
3 Seagrass specifically looks Mahit in the eyes. She says, "If you want me," like she's offered this glorious position, but she goes, "I am your." Liaison. Was that the word I was looking for?
Yeah.
I am yours, you know, if you want me. I will turn this down. Like she makes it very clear that she's still kind of
But Mahit
dedicated to Mahit. Oh, yeah. No, okay. Good point.
Mahit leaves and says, you know, like, "You go be second undersecretary to the Minister of Information. You go do that. You pursue your vainglorious ambitions." And, you know, and then Mahit meets 19 ads and requests, "Send me home. Send me back to LaSalle Station."
Yeah.
And that was like that was a little bit of a blow, but
yeah, it was kind of a bummer. It was a bummer.
So,
yeah.
I don't know. And like, so on the topic of the romance here, I'll bring this up. I think it was tastefully done. It wasn't like
Agreed.
Overly, you know.
It wasn't gratuitous. It wasn't forced. It didn't feel heavy-handed. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially with what's kind of become a trend in science fiction and fantasy over the last couple of years, where a lot of books, there's almost this feeling of like mandatory homosexual relationships in your book.
Here and there.
And
I mean, we just left the Acts of Cain, right, where we had a lot of that in there as well. But that was
that's a totally different generation of fantasy. But I'm talking about like new books, things that have come out
there's kind of like a
in the last
formula
3-4 years.
It feels like that you have to hit with a certain amount of representative LGBTQ characters here.
Yeah,
right?
there's a little bit of that, but because of that, I think a lot of authors fall into a trap of like feeling the need to put it front and center.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little
it becomes a character trait in itself. It becomes like I don't know, a part of that character's identity, when I really feel like it just I don't know. In this book, Martine made it feel organic, I guess is the way I want to describe it.
Yes. So as I was
Yeah,
saying, my point where I was going with that is like a lot of these authors make it very heavy-handed, and that can be like I kind of roll my eyes a little bit at it. And
sure.
there have been books that I've picked up and started reading in recent years where I haven't finished the book because I was like, all right, like this is a little like I got your point like 100 pages ago, all right. But with this, with A Memory Called Empire, it was just very seamlessly again like woven into the culture where it makes sense that sexual relationships are so freely handled because for people like on LaSalle Station, early they talk about how crazy the idea of somebody actually carrying their own baby is because they don't have the
Yeah.
resources for it. They don't have it would be too much of a strain on their society and things like that. And so because of that, it makes sense that in this culture, sex has become totally separated from the procreative aspect of it, and it's become purely like a physical romantic kind of thing.
And
And that it it's like whatever you like this person, do it.
yeah.
And I'm wondering because going back to that point about some of the other books I've read in recent years where it was a little heavy-handed. So Arkady Martine is a lesbian, and she's married to another
Is
writer
she
named
really?
Vivian Shaw. Yeah,
Huh. I had no idea.
and I have to wonder if like it's because this is just like natural to her, right? Like it's not something that as
Maybe that's
as
why
a
it felt so
lesbian,
goddamn natural. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
like
Yeah.
it just kind of flows in this book because it's not something that she feels the need to like
Focus on. She
virtue
doesn't need to
signal
over-explain.
or like check off a diversity checklist. She's just like, no, this is the character I wanted to write, and this is the character I know and I loved creating. So it felt natural. It felt the word you said was organic. It made sense in the world, and it wasn't like shoved in the reader's face. And again, like, because this is a space opera, right? It's not a romance.
Sure.
The romance isn't like the focus of the story. It was just like a natural progression of this relationship between these two characters that they developed this intimacy.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. I thought it was a very tastefully done romance in this, and it didn't it didn't take over the story.
Yeah.
She wrote it in such a way that the important parts of the story had plenty of room to breathe, and it just felt like, oh, yeah, this character is interested in guys and girls.
For sure. And I think it's worth mentioning, of course, that this isn't the only romance that's in the book. We have a physical romance between Yaskander and 19 Ads, and as we find out later, we have a physical romance between Yaskander and the Emperor's Sixth Direction.
Yes.
But
and a physical romance between 19 Ads and Sixth Direction.
What, really? I didn't pick up on that one.
Yeah, that was implied. At least that was my impression that I got from it.
Damn. Because my point was like, damn, Yaskander's getting around. 19 Ads and the Emperor, damn. But
yeah, I kind of had the impression that like all of them in that little inner group there.
Yeah, they might just have like an open
dallying
sort
around.
of dalliance. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But yeah, no, I agree with what you said. I believe it was tastefully done. It felt, as I mentioned earlier, organic. It wasn't heavy-handed. It was subtle. It felt natural. And, I think going forward, there's a lot to be learned with how she approached and how she, I guess executed the romance in this novel. It was well done.
Mm-hmm.
Well done.
Yeah,
Thumbs up from me.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what I talked to in the first episode about how she brought in, connections to the current climate that we live in 2019 on planet Earth, and the cultural and political things that we're dealing with as people today, and I think she continued to do that well in the second half of this book, and that romantic side of things I think ties into it. She wrote a very culturally applicable book. I think a lot of people can read this and find connections, find things that they like feel drawn to in various events that take place in it. I think this is a really good example of properly done speculative fiction that makes you sit back and think, but doesn't shove it in your face, like, for instance, Terry Goodkind does, or where we don't have like Mahit, internally monologuing about how horrible this like exact replica of whatever system of government we know in the world, like, or we don't have her like basically taking out a copy
waxing
of
about it
Karl
for
Marx
3.5
and burning it
pages, and explaining it 18 different fucking ways in case you were too stupid to understand it the first 17 times.
It was the kind of thing that like you can read this book, and if you're this kind of a reader, you could just read it and get the story and be fine with it. But if you're the kind of reader who wants to dig into something a little more, if you've, maybe if you took like English classes and you learned how to approach books from that kind of a point of view, this is rich for that. This is a text that you can really peel back the layers and get a lot out of, and get a lot to consider through the process.
Yeah. I'm so glad I got the physical. Well, no, not the physical, the electronic on my e-reader, because it's being able to actually sit down and read text is gonna, I think, add a lot more depth to this book when I approach it again in the future, because I will be rereading this. I'm sure I will be before the sequels are released. So I guess we're still loosely at the end of 3 Seagrass. Is there anything you want to get out of the way about her before we move on to somebody else?
No, I'm pretty much done with her, and I honestly don't have a whole lot to say about other characters other than Six Helicopter is a douche, and I really hope that he died when that shock baton hit him in the face.
See, definitely. Ditto on that one. I just have just small miscellaneous thoughts about 6 Direction, 19 Ads. I do have a little more to say about 12 Azalea, though. Just a couple points of that I want to bring to the forefront here. Did he read to you a little bit like the Larimar from Sanderson's Warbreaker?
The
Larimar, because here's my justification for that. He's this kind of elderly character, almost like a father figure. He's mostly along just for the ride. He's huffing and puffing, this kind of suffering type of humor, pulled along by the machinations or the shenanigans of those younger, more naive. But he's still along because he wants to protect them. Putting himself. To me, he read kind of like the Larimar. Not to you so much.
He read more like Light Song.
Whoa, Light Song.
Where he was enamored of the idea of intrigue and throwing himself into it perhaps a bit ineptly, and I definitely didn't get the father figure kind of thing, because he is he's the same age as 3 Seagrass.
Oh, is he this really? I didn't.
Yeah, they were
in
school together.
Oh, maybe it was. Oh yeah, they were, weren't they? Why did I get the impression that he was 15 years older than she was?
Oh no, yeah.
It doesn't matter. He just had this air of being. To me, he had this air of just kind of being pulled along with their kind of.
To an extent, but he was willing. I mean, he volunteered for a lot of things.
There was this quote, and I have this right now. My next point here in chapter 17, a quote from 12 Azalea that I really appreciated. It's when Mahit, 3 Seagrass, and 12 Azalea are arrested, and they hear a commotion outside of the room, and Mahit goes, "All right, fuck it. Anything is better than waiting. Let's go see." And then it goes, "We're arrested," 12 Azalea mentioned, but fuck it. Let's unarrest ourselves. And I went, okay, yeah, he's starting to really, I don't know, breathe a little more as well.
But yeah, no, my only real comment on 12 Azalea is rest in peace, buddy.
Yeah, I was so bummed that he died. I mean, it was great that he got the chance to die, bravely fighting for what he believed in. But like 3 Seagrass, he started to me, he felt a little more human through the second half. We got so much more info about him. We got a more personal look at his life. We were in his apartment for one scene. He was talking about his salary. We even learned about these intramural sports that he played. Yeah. And after all of that, it just kind of, to me, it just kind of sucks that he died off screen.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wanted a little more, for that guy. A little bummed.
So, I think that's a good jumping off point. We should move into maybe some predictions for the second book.
Sure. I didn't
and
actually write
my
any
bridge
down,
here
but
is
I can
that
just throw some. Yeah.
is that we know that what was her name? Five Portico,
Oh,
the
the surgeon.
neurosurgeon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she is working on an imago, and
Interesting. That's right.
I just like I kind of have this like feeling that she's gonna show up again and be a major player, and perhaps have some way of bringing 12 Azalea in part back into the picture. Because 12 Azalea was the connection to her,
Oh.
and she's a neurosurgeon. And maybe this is me being really,
But
really
wouldn't 12
hopeful
Azalea
because I want
already
him to.
need to have had an Imago machine in
Well,
him when
so
he died?
possibly, yeah. Well, in the traditional sense of how the Lascelles Imago lines work. But I think, she's been working on this kind of stuff for a while and may have,
No, she's been working on it just for a couple of days at this point, by the time he dies.
Well, no, but she's a neurosurgeon.
Yeah, she's a neurosurgeon, okay, but...
Yeah, and she, they talk about how she's got, all this crazy stuff and, schematics and things in her workshop, and Mahit says, she didn't mess with me, she didn't look at the note taped to my ribs, I'm not going to look through her stuff. I'm going to respect her privacy because she respected mine.
Fair.
So, and like I said, maybe this is me being really hopeful and
well,
wanting
it's a prediction.
12 Azalea to
right?
come back in some manner. But yeah, I mean, I really liked 12 Azalea, so.
Yeah, I liked him too. He was very I don't know. It was enjoyable every time he opened his mouth. I was like, I got a little bit of entertainment out of him all the way through, from the beginning to the very end. But what was I just about to say here? I can see on the as far as predictions go, I just obviously think that the bigger overall threat is clearly, I think, going to be this alien race that's kind of waiting in the wings. And that they're I think that what was her Five Portico was her name. I think she's going to be a little more central in the narrative going forward because of her expertise. I'm not sure if she's going to I don't know how effective she's going to be, but I think she's going to have an entirely different breakthrough, something completely different. Still has to do with her talents, with her abilities, but I don't know. I think she may be able to kind of reproduce a few Imagos or something very similar, but as far as to resurrect somebody who's already dead,
something has to happen with that. Like that.
Oh, the fact that Mahit gave her the Imago machine, that's going to come back and bite Mahit in the ass, and perhaps all of Lascelles Station in the ass. I actually do agree with that, absolutely. But I think she's going to be like the mad scientist, perhaps, that has an entirely different breakthrough that might help them against this mysterious faceless alien race, or could go very, very wrong and lead to a whole bunch of problems of its own sort. I see her being central to something like that going forward. Six Directions dead. I don't know. His six. We have 19 ads temporarily. As Empress, I suppose, or Empress. Until 8 Antidote, I think, is next in line.
Yep.
What about 1 Lightning? Where do you see that going? Because all things considered, turned out to not really be too important.
I'm really interested to see where that's going to go, because he was such a major player in the book, but was never on screen.
Yeah, he was literally on screen for a few seconds, but he wasn't like...
He was never in the same room with any of our characters. He had 2 lines of dialogue in the whole book. He was this threat looming in the wings, this impersonal kind of player in the game. And I have to imagine he'll become a more central figure immediately as a character, where he'll be there in person.
Okay.
In the second book, but it was just really weird to me, and it's something that I appreciated, because a lot of the time it's tough to to have an antagonist who's at a remove in a book,
Yeah.
it's hard to make it work.
Sure.
And I think she made it work in this one.
Well,
with
I
One
would say
Lightning.
I would go a step farther and say it's hard to make it work and feel natural. I mean, part of my mistake being with a villain that, for example, I had written way many years ago. They were kind of similar. They were just like never had any screen time. And going back, I can look at it and see that just feels like synthetic. It feels fabricated. It feels stupid and non-personal. I think it's a point in Martine's favor that she managed to make One Direction. Jesus Christ. One Lightning. Oh my God. Wow. One Lightning kind of so removed, but still feel like a person, like he's going to be important later. I do, as far as him going forward, I do still get this kind of sense that he's going to be an antagonist. He's not going to be, you know, somebody who we really appreciate going forward. He's going to be somebody who really grinds a lot of our gears, perhaps, and presents a major problem for our protagonists, I think.
Yeah, and so talking about like our own writing here, you've read All Flames Cast.
I have.
The most recent book I wrote,
pleasure,
and
yep.
I see Pradius in that as a similar kind of in the wings antagonist.
Yes, he's the one, and then we could censor this or bleep
well,
this.
Yeah, we don't need to talk
Oh,
about him. He's the guy. Yeah, you know who.
I know who he is.
But yeah, so that's why I said I appreciate what Martine did with One Lightning in this, because the last book I wrote, I tried to do a similar thing with that. So, and I think, I mean, I haven't had any, beta readers or gamma readers tell me that they didn't like how that worked. So, didn't tell me, oh, you need to make him more present in the story. Sure. So I think I pulled it off, but
yeah, no, I think you pulled it off better than I did when I was writing when I was fucking 16. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so do we want to go into like maybe some like 3 favorite scenes?
Shit, I didn't write any down. I mean, I could definitely just throw scenes forward that I love so much. Definitely. I mean,
I can do my 3 like right off the bat here.
Yeah, go for it.
Because there are 3. I mean, like this wasn't even a question for me. My 3 scenes are that scene in the morgue where Mahi and Iskander dissociate.
Yep.
The surgery and the suicidal sacrifice.
Yeah, those. I
mean, like
you probably nailed the heaviest 3. I mean, those are
like,
probably the exact
else?
3 scenes that I would have picked. The tension that we got when we don't know if Mahit's going to try and hide the fact that she also has an imago as she's observing Iskander's body, and she's just starting to kind of get to know 3 Seagrass and 12 Azalea, and they run into 19 ads for the first time. The tension in that scene was phenomenal. That definitely was on my favorite. That definitely was listed as my favorite scene for the first half, and I still definitely agree with that. And as far as the other 2 ones you mentioned, I mean, the chapter 16, so much happening in there. Mahit waking up for all intents and purposes as Iskander, how surreal and chilling that was. That was that was phenomenal. And then the most metal fucking death of all time, Mr. Six Direction, my man, the Emperor, just fucking bleeding out on top of the temple. Drew, at one point you gave me a list of like the most metal deaths in all of fantasy, didn't you?
Oh no, it was the most metal deaths in Middle Earth.
Oh, in Middle Earth? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was like all of fantasy, because I would be like, this would have to be, that list needs updating if that's the case, because this.
It may even have just been the most metal deaths in the Silmarillion. But yeah,
it was fucking awesome. That was such a hard-hitting moment. It was so badass. It kind of felt like just, I don't know, it's like this whole other, it felt like it was written almost by somebody else, because it was just so heavy and hard. But I mean, I think it still fits with the rest of this book. I really appreciated what Martine did with that. And it was so, I mean, going into it, that was the last fucking thing I expected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was taken aback by it too, but but by the time it happened, it felt inevitable. And that's a sign of really good writing, where it's surprising but inevitable.
And you still have that 2 minutes beforehand where you're starting to realize what's happening, and you're going, no, and then it happens anyway. Oh, it was great.
Yeah. Metaphorically speaking, you're like, what's that smudge on the horizon? Oh, is that Is that a train? Oh no, it is. Oh no, and the track's broken. Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, exactly. Released. I am a spear in the hands of the sun. And it's slash. Oh, good. Good writing.
Man. Well, on that note, shall we move into the final draft?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can start because I have I have a somewhat thematically appropriate beer. I was at the grocery store yesterday. Believe it or not, it was almost fucking impossible to find a thematically appropriate beer. I had time. I was there. I was thinking, this book focuses a lot on poetry. It focuses a lot. There's a lot of names that involve flowers, inanimate objects. I figured this is going to be easy to find a beer for. But holy shit, if it wasn't goddamn impossible. There was like 9 minutes left until the store closed. I'm sitting there looking back and forth. I couldn't find anything. I finally found one that's, somewhat involved. Based, of course, on Arkady Martine's, her proclivities towards poetry and verse. I have a beer here with me. It is a Citra Pale Ale. I assume they're going for citrus. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, so it's the name of a type of hops, Citra hops.
Oh, okay. There you go. I learned something new today. This was brewed in Hamilton, Ontario, from Collective Arts Brewing. This is called Rhyme and Reason.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah. And you know what? It was fucking delicious. I was expecting to hate this beer. It's 5.7%, so it's, a little slightly stronger than your average beer. It was very, very yellow, very, very bright. Fucking delicious, though. I mean, it was so citrusy. It's an IPA. Yep. You're gonna get those bitter tones throughout there, but it was so much so it almost felt like a shock top. It was very, very citrusy. So I mean, I would can absolutely recommend this one. I'm probably gonna go for it because it was also pretty cheap. And I mean, it's got this very, very cheap can that's just got this little wraparound kind of label on it. And as you can see, the logo is just this giant yellow background with a green lizard on it, with the artist's name on the back of the can from New York, USA. So yeah, Rhyme and Reason from Hamilton, Ontario. That's what I've been drinking.
I like it. I do think that's appropriate. That that's something that would come out of one of those poetry reading competitions from in the Tixkalonli court.
A poetry slam, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's funny, for my beer, I also had a pretty hard time. I spent a solid, 15, 20 minutes perusing the shelves.
Like, beers with, the names of flowers in them and stuff like that. You would think, but there really isn't.
I was looking for, any kind of, flowers, poetry, sun, spear. I really wanted to get, a spear one.
There was a spear one, but I thought it was, nah, it's not close enough.
But I ended up getting something a little more abstract, but that I thought was, very appropriate for the second half, especially of this book. And this is a
sure.
So it's an India Pale Ale, fermented in oak with Brettanomyces, which is a yeast culture. Provides a lot of funky flavor. You're gonna get a lot of Brettanomyces in
flavor.
Belgian saisons, farmhouse ales, things like that. It's and this beer is very funky. So it's an 8% oak-aged IPA from Anchorage Brewing Company in Alaska, and it is called The Ghosts in Their Eyes.
The Ghosts in Their Eyes. Oh, that is more abstract, but I can see what you're going for there.
It was especially the scene with Mahit meeting 19 ads again with both Yiskanders in her, and when she lets the older Yiskander take over her
facial expressions, and she says it's so weird the way that you smile like he, and the way that I love that.
And that was and I'll show you the label here. It's this kind of intense,
it looks like a screenshot from a horror movie, right, when some woman's being drowned.
And in the pupil there, there's a little skull.
That's kind of cool.
But yeah, I liked that one. I liked that it was a little more abstract, and it was fitting because the last episode I also had a beer connected to her, imago situation, the single by choice, because she was single, she was alone by the choice, not hers, but of Amnard Bots.
Yeah.
So
sweet.
Yeah, and to talk about this beer a little bit though, so it is hoppy. Yeah, it's an IPA. It's
As
pretty
you'd
tasty.
expect.
I'm not a huge fan of Brettanomyces myself. Uh, there's some beers, depending on how, the style comes out. Some like wild ales, farmhouse ales that I enjoy. This one is a little estery. It's a little soapy to me. Like I'm sure, and this is something that is like a personal thing for me. Apparently, it's like a genetic deal where like some people think cilantro tastes like
Oh yeah,
soap.
I've heard about that. Yep.
To me, some of these like Brettanomyces can taste like soap sometimes. So I was hoping this wouldn't be one of them. I mean, it's still not bad. Like I'm drinking the bottle, but it's a quality IPA.
It looks like
core,
it's
so I
the
can't
exact
complain.
same color as the beer that I just drank. I'm drinking out of a Wonder Woman cup, of course, a courtesy of my little sister Sierra. Shout out to Cease. What's up, Cease? But
Nice.
yeah. So sweet.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, overall though, I think I just want to say that I'm really glad we did this book.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad that we ended up agreeing on this one. Yeah. I was a little ambivalent in the first half. I had a couple complaints. I was like, it's a little slow. It's a little meta for me. There's too much poetry, too much syntax, too much, grammar and rules, and there's not enough action. But, I in the second half, I did see that there was a whole lot that I was missing. The pacing did pick up, but that wasn't the only thing that made it better. I mean, I started to get a greater appreciation for and again, I'll say this word even though it has some negative connotations, I'm not meaning it this way. This flowery language. I mean that in a compliment at this point. She has this delivery that's really something. And I, without a doubt, definitely want to cover the sequels in this series whenever they are, released. I'm looking forward to those.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Sweet.
This is a very different kind of book than those we've been covering.
There's so much to glean out of here, so much to dig into, not just from the plot, but from the actual prose itself. It's just, it is a work of art in itself. It was.
Even just like the subject matter, this is our first like space opera. We've done a lot of fantasy books, and even the science fiction books that we've done have fantastic elements. I mean, A Wrinkle in Time, or Kane, which is like a 50-50 sci-fi fantasy blend where you go from Earth with like future tech to overworld with magic and swords and stuff, and so this is the first like really pure grand scale space opera. Skyward is a pretty contained book by Brandon Sanderson. We
I will say, I think I enjoyed this one more than
but
Skyward. I think I did.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
Like, the writing was just so good in this book.
Yeah. I mean, Skyward was a YA, it was shorter, it was written for a younger audience. But there's just so much to get out of this book that, of course, I don't know why I'm even comparing them, because they're totally different genres. I shouldn't have compared them in the first place. Forget that I just said that. But it's
like they're both science fiction, and that's about
they're
it.
Both, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, on that note, I mean, I think this is a wrap for A Memory Called Empire, yeah?
Sweet. Thank you very much, Arkady Martine. It was an awesome read.
No kidding. So this has been episode 21 of the Inking Out Loud podcast. Next week, speaking of young adult books, we are going to be going back to Brandon Sanderson, and we're going to be kicking off a reread of the Reckoners trilogy. So next week, we'll be covering all of Steelheart, the first book.
Steelheart, yes.
And if you want early access to that episode, go check out our Patreon. We have several very excellent tiers on there, and one of them gives you early access to episodes.
Yep.
Otherwise, we also have tiers that give you access to some of our short story Patreon exclusive episodes. That will in the future include Brandon Sanderson short fiction, so
they definitely will.
Keep an eye out for that.
How can we not?
Yeah. So as usual, I am your host Drew McCaffrey, and my co-host Rob Santos.
What's up?
And thanks for joining us.
Thank you,
Catch you
everybody.
next time.
See ya.